Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very brief look at the Wizard's Tower, an expansion for the core game Castle Panic. Now it's important to note that you will need the core game in order to make use of the expansion, so don't go buying this if you don't have this already. Everything as far as the player limit, that's all the same. It's still 1 to 6. The minimum age recommendation has jumped from 10 to 12, mainly because the expansion introduces some more complex rules and mechanics, which I'll get into in a minute. So with that being said, let's just take a brief look at what's in the box and what you'll be seeing if you decide to pick this up. Now what you see in front of you are the components of the box itself. It's worth noting that you can actually fit all of these pieces into the core game if you so choose to. That way you don't have two different boxes lying around. You can simply just throw these in here. Everything will fit into the core box. So that's a plus. Now, as far as what you're actually seeing here, the game comes with a neat little draw bag of sorts for your monster tokens. Speaking of monster tokens, you've got a bunch of different new monsters as well as 6 mega bosses. The mega bosses have more than 3 sides to them. Let me see if I can focus in on this. For example, this dragon has, as you can see, a total of 5 health and actually moves around the board in a special way. And that's what these reference cards in the upper right-hand corner are for. All of the monsters, or most of them, in this particular expansion have their own movement rules. The regular monsters even have their own movement rules. The Centaur, slight if damaged in the Night Ring, not damaged by hit cards in the Archer Ring. The Climbing Troll moves over walls and fortify tokens. The Flaming Boulder destroys first structure it reaches and catches second structure on fire. The Gargoyle, immune to Knight, Swordsman, all boulders. As you can see, each of these new monsters have some type of special ability or movement action that players will need to observe. On the reverse side of this reference card are the 6 mega bosses. As you can see, this dragon moves depending on what you roll on the die. When drawn, breathes fire. While in play, moves by die roll. If you roll a 2, moves 1 space forward and then breathes fire. 3, no movement, breathes fire. 5, moves 1 space forward and then breathes fire. So yeah, the dragon is kind of a nasty customer in regards to fire. You've got the Hydra, the Necromancer, the Warlock. So as you can see, you'll definitely want to have one of these cards handy. Even after you've played the game for a while, it can get a little confusing, and there's a lot to remember there. Now, with that being said, each of these 6 mega bosses have these Harbinger tokens. As I was showing you earlier, these boss tokens have more than 3 sides. So they would be easily identifiable if they were put in the bag. Players could feel around the bag, and if they feel more than 3 sides, they can go, oh, that's a mega boss. Well, that's what these Harbinger tokens are for. These take the place of the mini bosses in the bag. There's 1 for each of the 6 mega bosses. Now you've also got 1 tower. This will take the place of one of your regular towers, and I'll show you that in a minute. But basically that enables players to make use of the wizard deck. And I'm not going to show you all of these cards, but basically these cards can be played in addition to the standard deck in the core game, and gives players special abilities. You've got the Ring of Fire, for example, catch all monsters on fire in all colors in the Swordsman Ring. This blessing, all players draw up from the castle deck to a full hand. The castle deck being the regular deck in the core game. Wall of Force, move all monsters in 1 arc back to the forest. So these are very powerful cards that will give players an edge to help them defeat some of these stronger bosses. The downside is that you'll have to keep this tower alive. If this tower happens to fall during the course of the game, players will no longer have access to that particular deck. Finally, you have these fire tokens. They fit over top of these various monster tokens. Well, they should anyway. They fit right over top. Normally they'd be laying flat. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, they fit right over top, like so, to indicate that they're on fire, and they take damage over time, which I'll explain in a minute. You'll also be placing these over walls as they catch on fire. So yeah, that's basically it as far as the components go. Setting up the expansion for play is done in a very similar way to the core game. In fact, I'm not going to go into too much detail here just because I've already covered Castle Panic in a prior video. But just to sum things up, you've got your wizard tower here. Normally you'd have 6 towers in the middle, but the wizard's tower is going to take the place of one of them. You can put it whenever arc you want, or you can roll the die and let the value choose for you. You've got your walls along the outside, nothing new there. Your monster tokens, you're going to separate out your imps, your mega bosses, and your harbinger tokens. Just put them aside. The other tokens, you're going to put them into a pile, but you're going to have to separate out some of them. The manual will tell you which pieces you're going to have to separate and eliminate from the game altogether. I'm assuming due to balance issues. Some of the trolls and goblins and the monsters move tokens are going to be moved out of this pile and placed out of the way for the game. Once you have the appropriate tokens, you'll place them into the bag and you'll draw 6, 1 for each arc, just like you would in the standard game. They would go in the archer ring. Once you have that done, you'll go ahead and randomize these 6 Harbinger tokens. You're going to choose 3 of them, place them in the bag. You're going to keep the Mega Bosses there because you're not going to know which Harbinger tokens were placed into the bag. Keep them face down if at all possible. The Imps remain outside of the bag. They're sort of special monsters that only come into play in certain circumstances. You've got your 2 decks up here, the Wizard's cards, the Wizard deck, and the regular Castle deck. You've got your fire tokens, your die, and of course your reference cards. Before you start the game, each player will draw from the castle deck a certain number of cards to form their hand. Again, the number of cards that you'll have available to you will all depend on how many people are playing the game. Again, that is no different than the regular Castle Panic game. Now, as far as the player turns are concerned and the phases that are in those turns, you're still going to have the same 6 phases. You're going to have the draw up phase, discard and draw phase, trade cards, play cards, move monsters, and draw 2 new monsters. If you're familiar with Castle Panic, then you'll be able to play this expansion and be familiar with how the turns play out. Though there are a few special rules that are added on to those phases. For example, the draw up phase, nothing new there. You just simply draw up to your hand limit. The second phase, discard and draw. Let's say I had a hand, oh, well, those are reference cards. There we go. Let's say I had these as my hand. Again, this is just an example. If I wanted to discard and draw, I can discard a certain number of cards. Again, the number you can discard all depends on how many people are playing. But let's say I discard 3 cards. I'd be able to draw up to that many. But I'd also be able to draw from the Wizard's deck and not just the Castle deck. So I could take 2 cards from here if I wanted to, and 1 card from here, just to sort of replace the ones that I just discarded. So the main way that players will have access to these spell cards, or these wizards cards rather, is by discarding during the second phase. The third phase, trade cards. Again, players can trade cards between each other during this phase. The number of cards you can trade with all depends on how many people are playing. Play cards. You can play cards from your hand, as many as you want, to attack the various monsters on the field. Again, you'll have to observe the colors and the different arcs. Archers can only attack monsters in the archer ring, and you'll also need to pay attention to the colors. If you want to attack a monster that is in the green archer ring, you're going to need a green archer or an equivalent card. You can't use a blue archer to attack a monster in the green archer ring. Once you've played your cards, you can move monsters. This is something a little different. A lot of these special monsters in the game from this expansion have their own movement rules, and again, that's where these reference cards will come into play. You'll also resolve fire during this step. Basically, you'll move the monster ahead 1, and then if it's on fire, it'll go ahead and rotate and take 1 point of damage. So it'll move and then it'll rotate to take damage. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Walls, if it accumulates 3 of these fire tokens, it gets destroyed. So that's something to look at as far as the fire goes. Once you've moved all of the monsters appropriately, you would draw 2 new monsters from the bag and use the die to figure out what arc that they spawn in. Again, nothing too fancy. The majority of this expansion will focus on these new monster pieces, their special effects, and of course the new fire and the wizard cards. Now, I admittedly just talked your ear off without really showing you much, and I apologize. But I just want to mention a few things here before I go. For one, you can play these brick and mortar cards to remove fire from any walls that happen to be on fire. It's 1 card for 1 fire. You don't need both, you just need 1 of those cards to remove fire. Now, if you do play a fortify card and place a fortification on a wall, that will remove all of the fire on that current wall. Now, a few other things I just want to quickly show you. There are some new castle cards that came with this expansion. I admittedly and accidentally left that out during the components bit of this video, but I just want to quickly show them to you now. For example, you've got this stand together card. Let me focus in on that. But basically, 1 player of your choice may immediately play 1 hit or a wizard card. You've got the change color card. Play this card with any hit card to change the color of the hit card. Change range, double strike, enchanted. Play this card with any hit card for 2 additional points of damage to the monster. So as you can see, they have the same backs as the regular castle cards do, but add their own flair to the game. Now, I also wanted to quickly show you some of these new monster tokens. Again, I admittedly didn't show them to you close up. So I want to rectify that. I'll go ahead and just choose some of them here. Alright, that works. Alright. One cool thing about this expansion is that you will actually encounter some flying monsters like the Phoenix and the Gargoyle, and as such they can only be affected by certain cards. Again, these imps are special monsters that will pop up from time to time, either by tokens like the 1 imp per tower token, or by conjurers or different things like that. They only have 1 hit point, but they can be very annoying. Some other things to show you here are the bosses. I'm not going to show you all of them, but Hydra, that has 4 hit points. You've got the Necromancer, that has 4 hit points. And again, they all have their own special effects and abilities. You saw the Dragon already. What else? The Chimera, there we go. So yeah, and then the Harbinger tokens. Again, there's 1 Harbinger token per boss. Again, these are used in place of the Mega Boss tokens in the bag, just so players can't feel around and figure out that they're holding a Mega Boss token. And there you have it. This is just a very brief look at the Wizard's Tower expansion for the game Castle Panic. I didn't cover all of the rules and special abilities and all of that found in the manual, but this should just give you a general idea as far as what the game looks like and what you're in for should you buy it. You can check out my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can click on the link in the below description. That'll take you there as well. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.